believe that being a defender requires more than building shooting skills on a range. It's also a development of the heart, mind, body, and spirit. Join us as we explore what it truly means to be a defender in your training and in your everyday life. Welcome to Defenders Live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson. I'm super excited to be with you again on a Wednesday evening. Tonight, I'll be talking to a good friend and what some would even consider to be a legend in the state of Montana, Mr. Gary Marbut. Gary has devoted most of his life to the right to keep and bear arms, to preserving that right in the state of Montana. And he's been doing it very successfully, I must say, for the last 30 years. Thanks in part to his efforts, over 70 pro-gun and pro-hunting bills have been written into law into the state of Montana in those 30 years. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, what has contributed to his success. And we'll be having a discussion about just what the title of the show says, the number one danger to preserving those rights, as well as much more. So stay tuned for that just in a little bit. But first, if you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please drop in the comments where you're watching from. We always want to hear from you. And if there is a lag on between my face and my audio, I apologize. You can let me know in the comments, but I've tried to remedy that, and I'm not sure that it's working correctly tonight. So if it's not, I do apologize for that. This episode tonight is brought to you by Barrel Block. Barrel Block is America's best-selling firearm safety and training aid. With its easy, simple to use design, Barrel Block allows you to train with your firearm with 100% safety. You don't have to disassemble your firearm to use Barrel Block, and no other product on the market today can match the safety and training realism of this product. So I encourage you to check that out in the link below in the description if you're interested in learning more about Barrel Block. Another announcement, I am running solo tonight. Mr. Adam Lynch, the founder of Defenders USA, is usually behind the scenes helping me out, but he is traveling home tonight after a couple of long days of instructor training. So we're glad that he got that under his belt, but he's exhausted and not able to join us tonight. So although he might get home in time, he might jump on towards the end. Who knows? You never know. But anyway, I'm probably going to be running solo tonight. So a few announcements before we begin. Defenders Live is now officially on almost every podcasting platform, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So be sure to subscribe there as well. And if you like what you hear, leave us a review. And also make sure you don't miss another episode of Defenders Live by going to defenders-live.com and signing up for email notifications. They're right at the bottom of the homepage. You can just put your email address in, and I send an email out every week letting you guys know what to expect for the next show. So don't be shy. If you have comments during the show, there's a reason why this is live. It is so that you can engage and comment during the show. So feel free to chime in as needed. And also, Gary has agreed to do a live Q&A at the end of the broadcast if anyone has any questions. So you don't have to wait until the end of the show to put those in the comments. If you have a question that pops in your head, just put those in the comments and we'll gather those at the end of the broadcast. So I see a few people are standing by here. Iowa, somebody from Iowa, not sure who that is. Scott from Fort Worth, I see you. Thank you for watching. Oh, and I guess Adam, Adam must be watching. He can't be watching and driving, but he's listening and driving in Arizona. And so again, I do apologize if my lips and my face aren't matching right now, but I'm not sure what to do about that. So let's get right into the interview with Gary. Gary has quite an extensive bio. I had trouble actually putting his bio together because he had such a resume, and but I did condense it as well as I could. And so Gary Marbut has been working over the last 30 years actively through the nonprofit Montana Shooting Sports Association to get over 70 pro-gun and pro-hunting bills enacted into law in the state of Montana. A former Army veteran and Montana rancher, Gary has devoted his life to preserving what he describes as our cornerstone of liberty, our right to keep and bear arms. He has also served as a firefighter and advanced life support paramedic in Alaska and has seen firsthand the trauma caused by improper use of firearms. Gary is a former firearms instructor in both pistol and rifle, graduating over 6,000 students, qualifying them for a Montana concealed carry permit. He was also the director and is currently the secretary of the 4,000 member Western Montana Fish and Game Association and was appointed by 2 Montana governors to the Governor's Concealed Weapon Permit Advisory Council. In 2009, he was awarded the National Grassroots Activist of the Year by the Second Amendment Foundation. He was also a recipient of the St. Gabriel Pacenti Medal for Defenders of the Faith, awarded to 1 to 3 people each year for exceptional contributions to U.S. gun owners, selected and awarded by the Second Amendment Foundation at the National Gun Rights Policy Conference. He is the author of, I didn't bring the book in here. I was going to. I have a copy of it. He's the author of Gun Laws in Montana, now in its 5th edition, as well as the author of the ebook Stories Worth Telling, which has a 5-star review on Amazon. So his stories must be worth telling. And he is the developer of the Be Safe Gun Safety Program for 1st through 5th grade children, distributed to every elementary school in the state of Montana. He's been featured on PBS and in the Wall Street Journal and has consulted in numerous federal and state criminal and civil cases as an expert witness and or legal consultant. Gary resides in Missoula, Montana, where he continues to dedicate his time toward the effort of preserving our right to keep and bear arms. So grab your popcorn, get ready. We're going to talk to Gary. Hey, Scars from Ohio, I see you. And Mike, I assume from Helena, is showing up tonight as well. John, it was you from Iowa standing by. So glad that you're on tonight. And Laura, yes, you're right. Tell Adam how it is. No driving and watching. Trish and Peter are on here. Hey, Trish and Peter, good to see you. Someone else from Montana. That's great to see. I'm sorry, I'm running the show by myself, so I'm not, it's not as streamlined as when Adam does it for me. Deb from Belgrade. Hey, Deb, glad to see you as well. So, and I don't know who this is, but they say no Bible study tonight, so they finally get to watch the show. So that's exciting. Good. I'm glad you're here, whoever you are. All right, so let's bring Gary Marbut on to the show. Hey, Gary, thanks for coming on.
Hi, I'm good to be here, and greetings to all of your audience.
Yeah, looks like we've got quite a few people on tonight. So this is good because Gary is, as you'll know, as you'll learn, he is a wealth of information, tons of experience in this space. And it's just a real honor to have you on, Gary. I'd like to begin with what you said to me the other day when we were talking on the phone, and it ended up being part of the title of the show, which is that you say the right to keep and bear arms is the cornerstone of liberty. And so why is I know why, but could you explain why that is?
So let me tell you how I came to that. I spent 3 years in the U.S. Army and then a decade in Alaska and came home to Montana and got involved in a lot of political kinds of things, education choice, tax limitation, property rights, other aspects of liberty. And after a couple of years of a lot of political activism, I looked back and saw that I really hadn't accomplished anything. And I decided then that I had to focus on what I considered to be the most essential aspect of freedom, of individual liberty, in order to make the progress that I wanted to make. So after thinking about that for a while, I decided that probably the most important aspect of liberty in our times, maybe in any times, is the right to keep and bear arms. So that's when I founded the Montana Shooting Sports Association to be the political advocate for Montana gun owners. And the rest, as some say, is history.
Yeah, and it's so crazy though when you put it in a nutshell, like when you put it in a bio of decades and decades of work, it can't describe the daily work that you must have to put in, and the time that this must
Well,
require.
let me give you one little litmus of that.
Yeah.
When I was headed off to Helena last legislative session, last sometime in February, to testify before a legislative committee about a bill, 2 hours on the road, I got to thinking about how many times I'd made that trip over the years. And I
Uh-huh.
looked back and made some guesses about how many times each session and how many sessions. And my rough estimate is that I've made that trip, round trip to Helena, about 450 times since I started advocating for the right to keep and bear arms. So
Wow.
that's quite a bit of time on the road.
That is. That's a lot of dedication. And you said that you have helped over 70 bills be enacted into law, pro-gun and pro-hunting bills. How rare is that to have that many bills, be a part of that many? I mean, do you have anything to even compare that to give people an idea?
I don't. I think I've probably had, I tell people that MSSA is the most successful such entity in America, which probably makes it in the world as well, since they don't do this in other countries.
Yeah.
But I have written almost all of those bills. And when we try and recruit members to MSSA, sometimes people tell us, well, I don't need to join MSSA because I'm a member of the NRA. Well, the NRA may or may not be a great organization, depending on your view and when you're talking about. But the NRA hasn't been the initiator of any of those bills, not one of them.
Mm.
So that's all Montana-centric work, and almost all of those bills are bills that I have written.
Wow. So, of those bills that you have written, is there is there one or two that really stand out to you as big wins for the state of Montana?
Yes, it took us a decade to put the right to hunt, fish, and trap into the Constitution. And
Wow.
it's interesting, we had to battle our Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks on that. They didn't want it, and they worked against us. And finally, we got it through the legislature as a legislative referendum, so it could go to the ballot for a vote of the people. And it's interesting that when it was on the ballot, it received the highest percentage approval rating of any constitutional change in Montana history. So I'm pretty proud of that. I do like the bill that we got through recently to move Montana to a permitless carry state.
Mhm.
MSSA did get the original shall issue concealed carry bill through in 1991. Up until then, there were basically no permits available in Montana unless you knew a district court judge. But we got shall issue concealed carry through in 91. And then in 2021, we got permitless carry through. So in Montana, if you're a law abiding citizen, you don't need a permit to carry or openly or concealed.
I do have a question. I asked this to somebody who was a lawyer a few shows back, and I was curious to know if there is a difference between permitless carry and constitutional carry, or are those
Yeah,
interchangeable?
no, there is a difference. And let
Okay.
me explain. The Montana Constitution has archaic language in it that says that we have the right to keep and bear arms. It's an individual and personal right, but that does not apply to carrying concealed weapons. So, um, therefore, concealed carry in Montana is a privilege granted by the legislature. That's why we
Oh.
call what we have as permitless carry. We did have a bill before the legislature last session to strike that old language from the Constitution. And let me explain that old language. That language that says the right to keep and bear arms does not apply to carrying concealed weapons was in the Constitution from the rewrite in 1972, and it was copied verbatim from the Statehood Constitution of 1889, which was copied verbatim from the Territorial Constitution of 1884, which was copied in whole cloth from the Missouri Constitution of 1873.
Wow.
And the reason it was in the Missouri Constitution in 1873 was because it was a Jim Crow effort. It was part of the effort throughout the South after the Civil War to create pretext to keep blacks disarmed. Okay.
Oh,
So that's the history of that provision in the Montana Constitution. And I told the legislature when we tried to get it passed or on the ballot last session with the constitutional referendum, I told the legislature it's time to get this archaic racist provision out of the Montana Constitution. There are a few legislators who didn't like me spinning it that way, but
I bet.
that's what it is. That's what the history is.
Huh. I never
And
knew
then
that.
we needed, well, a lot of people don't. We needed 100 votes to get it through the legislature and on the ballot, 100 votes from the 50-member Senate and 100-member House. And we got 98. So we'll be back with that next session, see if we get 2 more votes or maybe more than that in order to forward that to a vote of the people to remove that archaic and I say racist language from the Montana Constitution.
I'm glad I asked you that question. Okay, so then the next thing I wanted to ask you is I put a little teaser on the title of the show, and I can't remember exactly how I worded it, but I think it was the number one danger to the cornerstone. I forget now. How did I put it? The number one danger to your right to keep and bear arms is essentially what it meant. And I did that so that people would tune in and be like, "Oh, what's the number one danger, right? To preserving our right to keep and bear arms." And I have my opinion on what that is. I'm curious what yours is, but mine is that I think that especially in states like Montana and other red states, the the idea of thinking that we're just okay and nothing could ever happen here is going to be dangerous. The complacency is dangerous in my opinion. And I think being vigilant is a better idea. What are your ideas on the number one danger to those rights?
So I agree with you, but I would say it a little differently. I would say the number one danger is apathy.
Yeah,
I would say people need to be more than vigilant. They need to be active. They need to be involved in many ways, involved in the neighborhood level, in the county level, at the state level. They need to tithe some time to become involved and learn about the issues and weigh in the public assemblies and be involved. I know I told you that MSSA, like every organization, struggles to recruit members. And by the
mhm,
way, we have a website at mtssa.org, and there's membership information there for people who may be inspired to think about that or to become a member. In any case, when we try and recruit members, the first answer we usually get is, "Oh, I'm a member of the NRA, and so I don't need to join anything else." Well, we've already discussed that. The
mhm,
second answer we get is, "Hey, Montana gun laws are just great. There's no reason why I need to join some organization in order to have good gun laws." And so, excuse me, that's what MSSA did. That's why we need you to join us so we
right.
can have even better gun laws. For example, in the next session of the legislature, the constitutional referendum to strike that archaic racist language out of the Montana Constitution so we can move from being a permitless carry state to being a constitutional carry state.
Mhm. That's great. You're so articulate. I wish I was as articulate as you are, Gary. You must have a lot of practice. Yeah. So for those people that do feel moved to take action, you said not just to definitely not be complacent, but to take action. Where would someone start who just has never been involved before? What can they do? Where should they begin?
So when I go to the legislature to speak in favor of bills that MSSA has before the legislature, I always send out word on the MSSA email list, which, by the way, anyone can join. All they have to do is send me an email and ask me to be on the MSSA email list. In any case, that would be MSSA at mtssa.org. Not our Facebook page, but our email. In any case, um,
I can change
I
that.
I'm always begging people to come to Helena and stand up in front of the committee and urge the committee to approve the bills that we have before the legislature. It's too often I'm very frustrated that I'm the only person up there standing before the committee. And I know it is an absolute pain in the neck to give up. That always happens during the week. Those House and Senate bills come before the Judiciary committees, which meet early in the morning. So it means driving in the dark or staying overnight. and traveling all the way to Helena and standing up and speaking in public, which is terrifying for some people. I understand, I get it. And taking a day off work maybe in order to make all that happen. And so it's not easy, but freedom is not free. And it takes effort, it takes activism. Freedom is a participatory activity, and you don't get it hanging around being passive. So to follow up on your comment about complacency, I'd say that apathy is the chief threat to our liberty and to the right to keep and bear arms in Montana. And what's needed to cure that is for people to make a commitment to become active. And I have to tell you, I'm not complaining about this. I don't want anybody to think I'm complaining. But many years ago, when I embarked on this journey, I knew that it would take a lot of commitment of time and effort. And I've foregone lots of opportunities and income producing possibilities and other kinds of things in order to stay on this track and engage with enough time to really make a difference. And so I'm glad to have had the success I've had, but it takes commitment to make it happen. It's not just one thing a person can do, or something a person can do, once every 6 months and say, okay, I have defended liberty. Not enough.
Is there a time where people are needed the most? I assume it's when they're in session, which is every odd year. Is that correct? Every other year?
Every other year, every odd year, the legislature meets for 90 working days, which do not include weekends or the mid-session break. So that stretches over almost 4 months, or maybe even a little more than 4 calendar months. And it always starts in the first week of January, which means, if you have to go to Helena in middle of January, the roads are not going to be nice, but still you have to show up. There are opportunities now for people to show up by video. I can tell you that from the perspective of the members of the legislature watching the testimony, a video appearance is about 20% as effective as being there in person. Wow. They know how difficult it is to saddle up and get to Helena. And so they really respect that people will make the effort to do that. And if all a person can do is to stand up to the microphone and say, my name is Joe Blow and I'm from 2. Montana and I support this bill, please pass it, and turn around and sit down, that is surprisingly meaningful to the legislators who hear that testimony.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah. And this doesn't apply only to Montana, guys. This applies where you live too. So I'm asking these questions, and many of this applies to Montana, but also applies all around the country. I'm curious if you have noticed, since you've been in this game, so to speak, for quite some time, have you noticed in the state of Montana specifically a big change in the political atmosphere, either recently, or has it been a slow thing, or not a change at all?
Well, change is inevitable, and yes, it's always been changing, and there have been some trends over the years. One trend that I have seen is the trend for the legislature in Montana to become more conservative. The Republicans, not all of whom are conservative, now occupy 2/3 of the House and the Senate. And so they have a super majority. And if you can get them all pulling together, that's a wonderful thing. And generally, even the ones who are soft and squishy on tax or social or other issues will generally hold the line in Montana on right to keep and bear arms issues, because that's a live wire they don't want to touch. That's a third rail that they don't want to get near. But I have seen that gradual change over the years of the legislature becoming more and more Republican. I do have to say that we've gotten a lot of bills through and signed into law when Democrats had the majority in the House and Senate, and the governor was a Democrat. So we've also had Democrats kill a lot of our bills, and we've had Democrat governors veto a lot of them. So, we've had a
Mm.
lot more bills up there than just the 71 successes we currently brag about. And by the way, if somebody is curious about what those successes are, on our website at mtssa.org, there is a tab for our successes, and you can go through there, click on that tab, and go through a list. I think about 50 of our 71 successes are listed on that page.
So what do you think it is then in the state of Montana and that is putting us in this position? I'm hearing other states like Missouri and Colorado. I had some members of Women for Gun Rights recently from the state of Colorado and Missouri, and those are states that traditionally are very red, and for whatever reason, things are kind of starting to go sideways there just a little bit. And so, what would you say to people who are living in those kinds of areas where maybe things aren't looking so good? Probably the same advice you just gave me about getting active, right?
Exactly. People have to get more active, and Colorado is really falling off the wagon. I
Hmm.
think there are too many people from California moved there. Missouri,
Hmm.
not so bad. Missouri is still pretty much holding the line and doing much better than Colorado.
Hmm. Are there any other states that you're aware of that are kind of falling off the wagon, so to speak, as you say?
Well, there are, of course, plenty who are long gone off the wagon.
Right.
California, New York, and Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and Illinois, and others. Um, but my sense is that the sleeping giant that is the American people is waking up. But the big question is, are they waking up quickly enough to save the nation from
Mm-hmm.
some kind of spiral? And I don't have a crystal ball or the answer to that question. But my sense is that there is something of an awakening.
Hmm. Yeah, I sense that as well. Um, I'm curious what your biggest challenge has been over the last 30 years with, I call it this fight, and it is a fight, really, in what you've been doing. Do you have a biggest frustration or a biggest challenge, something that keeps you up at night, or something that you can share with us about that?
Well, the most anti-gun entity in Montana history, as far as I know, has been the Montana Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association.
You're
And they have
kidding.
opposed so many of our bills. And that's really odd because most of the sheriffs are very pro-gun guys. Okay. I
Hmm.
really like the sheriffs in Montana. We have good sheriffs in Montana by and large.
Hmm.
But there's some anti-gun people who got hold of the office in Helena of the Montana Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. And the chief guy for many years there was also the co-founder of Montana's first active gun control organization. And so he would steer that organization in opposition to all of our bills.
Wow.
And I spent years preaching to sheriffs that this guy was wasting their political capital in Helena by opposing all the gun bills, and that because he had wasted their political capital, they could no longer get things done. They didn't have the political capital to get things resolved that they really needed to be resolved, like who pays the medical costs of prisoners, of state prisoners in their county jails, and other things that are of more importance to them than gun bills. So finally, I think that message trickled out, and they finally replaced the guy who had been the anti-gun guy for so many years. And it
Mm.
seems to me that they are now being a little, they're not coming in against our bills. They're not being such antagonists for our
Hmm.
bills. They
Hmm.
were for decades our chief opponent politically in
Wow.
Montana.
That's really surprising. And someone the other day was telling me how important it is to get to know your sheriffs in your county, your sheriff of your county, and to know what their stance is on different issues. Would you say that's important?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's very important that the sheriff know. And again, by and large, my experience is that the sheriffs generally are very good guys, and they're very honorable, and they're very agreeable politically. But it's also good for them to know that their constituents are paying attention.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, by the way, guys, I want to let you know that we're going to have a live Q&A shortly here with Gary. So, if you have any questions for Gary, please drop those in the comments. I'll be gathering those here shortly. I know, Gary, you're not used to being on the show, but I'm here every week and I'm used to having Adam in the background. And I have to say, it's very quiet without Adam helping me. He's usually popping stuff on the screen all the time, and I just can't multitask very well. So, I apologize if it seems a little quiet in that regard. Um, could you talk a little bit, Gary, about the Be Safe program that you came up with, and what's that all about and how did that come about?
Well, we wanted to get some gun safety training on board with kids while they were young. And actually, I had this first idea when my son, Ty, was a young kid. And I figured out that kids in the first through third grade are very flattered, that kind of age range, are very flattered to be talked to about gun safety.
Mhm.
And when they get a little older, up in the fifth, sixth, seventh grade, they get cocky, they know it all, right? And they're a little harder to get the gun safety message through
Some guys
too.
never get rid of that, Gary.
So I wrote this program, and it's Be Safe is basically a story about how one Montana family deals with gun safety issues in the home. And it's a printed sheet that the classroom leader, a teacher or a guest or somebody, will read to the kids. It's a story to read to the kids about how one Montana family deals with gun safety issues.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then whoever's making the presentation will pass out copies of this and ask the kids to take it home and have their parents read it to them and siblings one more time before they go to bed. And what that does is it reinforces the message, and it also offers parents a strategy. If they like what this fictitious Montana family does about guns in the home, it offers them a strategy that they can utilize in their home for gun safety practices.
Mhm.
So I think we started that in 1991 or 93. It's approved by the legislature. It's approved by the Office of Public Instruction. And we've distributed hundreds of thousands of copies of it to schools in Montana. In the more modern age, we've dreamed of having that be an interactive video presentation that every
Mm.
teacher in every classroom can tap into and deliver to kids. And not just classrooms, church groups and Boy Scout groups and 4-H groups and others. And so we're about halfway down that road. Again, on the MSSA website at mtssa.org, there's a link for the Be Safe program. And the first stage of that video is up there and available. It's not yet interactive. That's going to be phase 2. But it is there and publicly available.
That's really awesome. I have learned a lot, Gary. There's a lot in doing my research on you, through talking to other people, and through talking with you on the phone, that I just didn't know. So I really appreciate that. And like I told you, there's a lot that I was never taught about basic things about the government, how it works, civics, these kinds of things. And I hate to admit that I don't know what I don't know, but there's only one way to learn, and that's to ask questions. And so I figure maybe I can be the person to ask some of those questions that maybe others have as well. Um, and so this has been really interesting. Um, so then,
So before you go on,
yeah.
um, a lot of people have those kinds of questions about civics because
Mhm.
unfortunately schools don't do as good a job as I would like in teaching people about civics. One of the things people often don't know much about is the legislative process and how a bill becomes a law, and where's the Capitol in Helena, and where's the hearing room for the House Judiciary Committee, and all kinds of other things about the legislative process. How can I be involved? And so I wrote up the answers to all those questions. The domain that I own is progunleaders.org,
Okay.
progunleaders, plural.org. And that's a domain that I use to put things on the internet that can be done with my very limited website programming skills. Okay, so I can throw things up there and have them up there, and without a lot of talent in terms of webmastering. But that's a long list of links at progunleaders.org. And if you scroll down that list for a ways, you may find other interesting things there you'd like to look at. But down the list somewhere, there's a link about the legislative process. That's really a civics lesson about the state legislature and how it works. And not only that, how to testify before a bill, and when is it your turn, and what do you say, and how do you behave, and how do you address the committee, and even where do you park when you come to the Capitol, and stuff like that.
Wow.
So for a person who wants that kind of jump start on the civics involved with interacting with the legislature, it's all written out there at progunleaders.org under the link for the legislative process.
Gary, I think you thought of everything.
Right.
That is so cool. I don't see anybody asking any questions. Come on, you guys have questions. I know you do. Don't be shy. So my last question of the evening here, and if you've got something you'd like to bring up, please do. This isn't all just me here, but I'm curious what your biggest concern is for the future for Montana and or for the nation, really, and what is your biggest hope?
I have all kinds of concerns. And I can tell you, that's such a large question. I'd like to shrink that question a whole bunch, if I may.
Sure.
And talk about a little bit about the bills that MSSA will have before the next legislative session, because those are things that we're concerned about, that we are intending to do something about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I've talked about the legislative referendum for the constitutional change to take that archaic and racist language out of the Constitution that says the right to keep and bear arms doesn't apply to carrying concealed weapons. Okay, so that'll be our flagship bill. We'll also do another constitutional referendum about the Board of Regents.
Oh, yeah, I know that's a big issue.
This is all about campus carry.
Mm-hmm.
We got campus carry through the legislature, and the Board of Regents immediately filed a lawsuit against it, claiming that it infringed on their powers under Article 10 to, quote, manage the affairs of the university system. Okay. The judge in the case, before there were any arguments, oral arguments, or briefs, or anything else having to do with the case, before any of that happened, he issued a written order saying, in this case about campus guns, I, the judge, will not tolerate any discussion whatsoever about the right to keep and bear arms in the state or the federal Constitution. The only thing we're going to talk about is the powers of the Board of Regents under Article 10 of the Montana Constitution.
Wow.
And yeah, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. It's interesting to see you go silent, but in any case.
I know that's rare, isn't it?
So based on having staked out that turf, the judge ultimately agreed with the regents and found that the campus carry provision passed by the legislature and signed by the governor was unconstitutional because it violated the regents' powers to manage the university system. So what we need to do is amend the Constitution and clarify that whatever the regents' whatever powers they have to manage the university system, it includes no power to amend, alter, abolish, or ignore the rest of the Constitution. That they're still subject to the rest of the Constitution, the right to freedom of press, freedom of association, trial by jury, due process, all of those things, non-discrimination, all of those things apply to the Board of Regents, and they're not immune from those like they claim to be immune from the right to keep and bear arms. So that will be another constitutional referendum. It will also be a heavy lift, because a heavy political lift, because it will require 100 votes out of the 150 member legislature to advance that to the ballot for a vote of the people. So that'll be the number 2 item on our legislative agenda. The third item will be non-discrimination. And what we'll do is there's currently discrimination based on certain criteria is prohibited by the Montana Constitution, and is prohibited by law. And the law further defines things about which people may not be discriminated against: race, creed, religion, age, color. I don't know what the whole list is, but we will add the right to keep and bear arms to that. And so that will, the effect of that will be that in things like lending and insurance and public access and other kinds of things, they won't be able to say, sorry, no shirt, or, you know, we don't serve you because you're a gun owner, or because whatever.
I just can't believe that would ever happen. That just sounds so crazy to me. But yeah.
Oh, well, it has happened. We had to get a bill passed about a decade ago. I got a call from a guy in Billings who told me he's in a wheelchair and he lives in handicap accessible housing that is subsidized. And he says he's also a hunter. And he said the people he rents from came to him and told him that he could not keep his hunting rifle in his room. If he insisted on a hunting rifle, he'd have to move out. And he said to me, there is nowhere else in Billings that I can afford or that I can live. And so we went to the legislature and passed a bill prohibiting discrimination in housing because of firearms.
Wow.
So that has happened in Montana. There has been discrimination, and so we dealt with that. But I'd like to cover the whole wide gamut of activity and about discrimination. If an insurance company says, sorry, we can't write you an insurance policy, homeowner's insurance policy, because you have guns, sorry, no deal. Or if a bank says, you want to start a small business, and if it's a restaurant, fine, we can deal with you. But if it's a gun store, sorry, no, we're not doing that. Sorry, the law would then prohibit discrimination.
Yeah. Gosh, that hadn't even crossed my mind before.
Well, and that's part of my job, is to think up those things. You know, we had the nation's first Shooting Range Protection Act, which we got passed, I think, in 91, maybe 93. But what I was traveling around the nation shooting competitively in the sport of practical pistol, going to matches from Florida to Southern California to the East Coast and Washington and all over. And what I was hearing from people in more urbanized areas was they were losing their ranges, and because of population encroachment and noise complaints and other kinds of stuff. So I came back to Montana and wrote the nation's first Shooting Range Protection Act. But it was perspective. We didn't have that threat to our shooting ranges back then. We will in the future. And that Shooting Range Protection Act has already protected some ranges in Montana where there's been some encroachment. But now it's on the books. And so you can't close a range in Montana using zoning or planning or because of allegations of metals deposition or other or outdoor noise complaints. Okay. The only reason any public entity can close a shooting range in Montana now is with proven safety defects. And then they have to give the range operators opportunity to cure those defects before a range can be closed. So we didn't have that problem. We were preventing that problem from happening in Montana.
Is there anything else go ahead?
The same with discrimination. We don't have a huge problem with discrimination in Montana right now. We don't want to have it in the future, which is why I'd like to get that law passed.
Genius. You're so smart, Gary. Is there anything else that you see potentially coming down the line that you think that we need to be paying attention to? Maybe not in Montana, but in other states, perhaps.
I see all this stuff on the federal level about bump stocks and pistol braces and force reset triggers and suppressors and efforts to ban this and ban that and ban something else. Well, we got a bill passed. I think it was 21 or 21, prohibiting Montana law enforcement officials, Montana public employees, from assisting federal officers in enforcing any federal restriction on firearms that was enacted after January 1st of 2021. Okay, I'll tell you how that came about. It's kind of an interesting story. I was back in New York City to appear on the Glenn Beck show to talk about the Montana Firearms Freedom Act, which I had written. That's another interesting story we can get into if you want. But I was in the green room with Judge Andrew Napolitano. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a frequent talking head commentator. And I was telling him about our sheriff's first bill that would make it a state crime for a federal officer to arrest, search, or seize without the advance written permission of the county sheriff. And Judge Napolitano said, Gary, you don't have to go that far. Just don't help the feds enforce their laws. He said, they don't have enough manpower to do it. So I came back to Montana and I wrote that bill, which we finally got passed. We had to take a couple of runs at it to make it happen. But now Montana law enforcement officers or all Montana public employees are prohibited by law from helping the feds enforce things like a bump stock ban or a pistol brace ban, or anything that's happened since January 1st of 2021.
Wow, you have been doing a lot of work. I'm feeling like a slouch over here, Gary. All I have is a weekly show. This is all I know to contribute, though, but I'm glad I have people like you that have agreed to come on. We do have a question that just came up, but before that question, we had a comment I wanted to read, and it's to you. This is all fantastic information we hope will be shared to anyone and everyone who cares about the future freedom in Montana and in our country. Thank you, Gary, for all of your sacrifices for this wonderful state. We sure do appreciate you. I don't know who wrote it, but I wanted you to see that for sure. Okay, here's the question that came up. Can you please speak to the enhanced concealed carry permit and what that means for Montanans?
I can. It's junk. It's a waste of time. In the last session of the legislature, the NRA was desperate to show that they had actually initiated some kind of bill in Montana and had a success of their own in Montana. And they brought this terribly cobbled up bill that was a really bad idea about an enhanced concealed weapon permit. Allegedly, it would gain Montana recognition, Montana permits recognition by 3 other states. But that the reason is because Montana issues permits to people who are 18 to 21. And the 3 states, in addition to the 35 states that already recognize Montana permits, the theory was that these 3 additional states would come to recognize Montana permits if permits were only available to people who were 21 and older. So, and that's how these 3 states do it. They only issue permits to age 21 and older. But whether or not they recognize Montana permits is totally optional with those other states. There's no way Montana can force that. And those states are all going in the other direction of being more restrictive of guns rather than less restrictive. So they're not going to recognize Montana permits, even if they're this enhanced new permit. Meanwhile, the bill is fatally flawed, or the law is fatally flawed for enhanced permits, and it is so poorly drafted that nobody understands it. And so the sheriffs don't understand it. They can't comply with it. Instructors don't understand it. They can't comply with it. For example, it says that a student who completes this enhanced permit class has to fire 90 rounds. It doesn't say whether or not they have to hit anything.
I know.
Primers.
You're totally right.
There's so many things on it. It's undefined, things, internal conflicts, but there's also one fatal flaw. And that is Montana Constitution says that people who are 18 are adults and they cannot be denied any adult privileges.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first time it hits court, it's going to get tossed because it's in conflict with the Montana Constitution. So instructors are calling me from around the state saying, what do we do about this new enhanced permit? Do we teach this class? I tell them, forget it. Don't even bother. Even if you can find if you're a sheriff will actually issue one of these. And I haven't found a sheriff yet who will, because they don't understand the law. And even the
Oh,
attorney general can't tell them what the law means. That even if they can find a sheriff who will issue allegedly enhanced permit, it's not going to do anybody any more good than an existing permit, because these 3 states that would allegedly take Montana from 35 to 38 states that recognize Montana permits, these 3 states aren't going to recognize Montana permits, even if it is an enhanced permit. So
really?
it was a vain effort by the NRA to do something. I don't know. I don't understand.
Sounds like a big mess.
It is.
Yeah, and as an instructor, I did look up what the requirements were, and you're right. Yeah, it's the round count is shown, but you're right. It doesn't have any kind of competency or any. There's no parameters really behind it. So,
Well, of course. Yep.
yeah, just it seems just like more hoops to jump through to me. And
It was just the NRA trying to give themselves a pat on the back, and they did it in a very unartful and clumsy way. And yes, they got the bill passed because Montana legislators didn't want to be on record as opposing the NRA.
oh,
But the bill is stupid.
wow. Well, I'm glad whoever asked that question, thank you for asking that question, because that's really enlightening. So we are going to wrap up for the evening. Gary, is there anything that you'd like to leave our audience with before we go tonight?
Probably it's that the Montana Shooting Sports Association has been successful. We are respected and forceful in Helena, but we're only as strong as our members. And we need members. We need people to join, become a part of MSSA, get on our email list so they're getting information about stuff important to Montana. By the way, on our email list, a person only needs to send me an email to mssa@mtssa.org.
Oh, did I get that wrong? So it's MSSA@MTSSA?
Correct.
Oh, I'm
Correct.
sorry. Sorry, guys. I'll fix that.
Send me an email and ask me to put you on the MSSA email list, and I will. It's free. When the legislature is not in session, I send something out to the list. I would guess on the average of maybe once every week or 2. It's not a lot of email. When the legislature is in session, it'll often be daily. Okay, updates on bills and when hearings are coming up and stuff like that. Anyway, so we need people to join MSSA. We need people to get on the MSSA email list. We need people to take on a commitment to becoming active and participating in the process of civics. Again, freedom is not free. It takes participation.
Yep. And wherever you guys are that are watching, not from Montana, this applies to you, right? This applies to everyone. We're all in this together, right? Prescott says, let me know when to come join you at the Capitol. So he's requesting to be on the email list. So he probably sent you an email, hopefully to the right one. I had to change it. I apologize for that. So,
and I have lots of people saying, well, let me know when it's time to go to the Capitol. And my answer is always the same. There's not enough hours in a day for me to call people individually and say, okay, time to rally. Best thing is just get on the MSSA email list, because I will be getting that information out. By the way, we have just gone through the process of surveying all the candidates for the legislature. And soon MSSA will be publishing endorsements before the primary, because gun owners want to know, we have Joe Blow and Sally Dokes running for the state house in my district. And how do I know which one of them? They both claim to be pro-gun. How do I really know? By the way, if a person is curious about this, the top link at progunleaders.org is for our candidate questionnaires. We put it up there so we can email candidates and say, here's your candidate questionnaire, but they're in the public domain. So any of your audience who want to go look at our candidate questionnaire, see what kind of questions we're asking legislative candidates or congressional candidates or judicial candidates, you can go look at those candidate questionnaires. They're in the public domain.
That's funny that you brought that up, because this just came in. Does MSSA give a recommendation for legislature elections? So yeah, the answer is yes.
Wherever we have information, and we have voting records, which we carefully compile on incumbents who have served. And we send out candidate questionnaires to challengers or people in open seats, and we hope to collect information. And we generally have information about races, but there are races where we don't get any information. Democrats never send in our candidate questionnaire. The Democratic Party tells people who run under the Democratic banner, do not fill out the MSSA candidate questionnaire. But on the Republican side, we definitely want to separate the sheep from the goats. And we do survey everybody and compare those with voting records and publish that information.
Oh my gosh, that would be a perfect t-shirt idea, Gary. Separate the sheep from the goats, and on the back it could have the logo. Or no, the front could be the logo. That would be a great t-shirt idea. No, you don't think so? Maybe.
That's not my wheelhouse.
Those
T-shirts
kind of
and
things pop in my head all the time, and then they randomly come out of my mouth at the worst time. So there you go. All right, great. Anything else, Gary, that you want before we wrap up this to say to everyone?
oh, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And you keep answering questions.
Yeah, I don't see any more that are in the chat here. If I see another one pop up.
The Montana Firearms Freedom Act? Well, we have 5 minutes left.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so most of the federal power, a lot of federal power comes from the provision in the Constitution that gives the Congress the authority to regulate commerce among the states. Okay, Commerce Clause power. And I wanted to challenge federal Commerce Clause power, but it would require overturning U.S. Supreme Court precedent from the 1940s. So to set up a legal challenge, I wrote the Montana Firearms Freedom Act, which declared that any firearms made and retained in Montana are not subject to any federal regulatory power under the Commerce Clause because they haven't traveled interstate commerce. There's a lot of detail about that whole episode that's kind of interesting, and a lot of detail about the Commerce Clause that maybe we could do another session on sometime. But the upshot was we filed a lawsuit in federal court and got all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, but the U.S. Supreme Court would not hear our case. So we didn't accomplish ultimately the purpose of effectively challenging federal Commerce Clause power.
Wow. I just got another question actually texted to me. Are you up for another question?
Sure.
It says, in addition to going to Helena, what can we do in our local communities?
Well, you can, if you can't get to legislative hearings, you can always write letters, send emails, send messages to legislators saying, please support the right to keep and bear arms. You can talk to local candidates. You can ask your local candidates for office if they have completed the MSSA candidate questionnaire. And if not, why not? Or you can print out a copy of the MSSA candidate questionnaire and march up to their campaign appearance or their door and say, what do you have to say about this question that MSSA asked you? And what about this question down here? And what about this question? So the questions are already posed. So people who are listening, who are in the audience here, don't have to think up really good questions to ask candidates. We've already figured those out. All you have to do is go to progunleaders.org, to the legislative candidate questionnaire, print it out, and either present a copy of that to the legislator and ask them if they have returned it to us. And if not, ask them those questions, see if they give satisfactory answers.
And anyone could use that in any state. Those are just questions, right?
Well, it's tailored for Montana.
Specific? Oh, they are. Okay. I didn't know for sure.
We do our candidate questionnaires differently. People from other states will find interesting subjects in those questions. And we break a lot of trail in Montana as we have new ideas that then catch on in other states. Montana Firearms Freedom Act was introduced in 26 other states. 26 other states copied it. 8 other states passed it. So we originate some ideas here in Montana that other states pick up, and people in other states may get some good ideas or some inspiration from our candidate questionnaire. But a lot of entities like the NRA have a questionnaire that asks, can you hear thunder and see lightning? And we don't do it that way. I mean, they ask, Would you support an assault weapons ban? Well, excuse me, that bill is not going to come up in the Montana legislature. Nobody, not even a Democrat, is going to be stupid enough to introduce that bill in Montana. We ask questions about our prospective legislative ideas. We may have a bill in the next session to do this and that, and will you support it? So our questionnaire is somewhat specific to Montana.
Yeah, that makes sense. We did have another question come up here. Laura wants to know, did SCOTUS not hear that because of lack of standing, or what was the reason that they wouldn't?
No, because SCOTUS only takes like 4 out of 100 cases appealed to it.
Oh.
And also, we were threatening a lot of vested interest. It would have been politically very difficult for SCOTUS to hear that, because we had such a good argument that it would have been pretty persuasive. But had they agreed with us, it would have rolled back about 50% of the power the federal government asserts today. I mean, there are all kinds of things that are done under the guise of Commerce Clause power. Releasing Canadian wolves in the Yellowstone ecosystem was a Commerce Clause exercise, right? And they claimed that Congress had the power to do that because some tourist could come want to see wolves, and that tourist would cross state lines and spend money. And so, yeah, that's a interstate commerce, right? I could go on and on about
a stretch. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time tonight, Gary. You've just been so kind, and gosh, there's nothing that I can ask you that you just don't have the very best answer for. I mean,
so if we do this again, you should read through our list of successes on the MSSA website, because I think there are probably some of those you'd want to talk about.
I think I might ask you to come back. Would you be open to that?
You think this is only a one-time deal?
Wait, are you setting me up now? That's great. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to wrap up here, but I do appreciate your time, Gary, very much. Thank you so much for coming on. And if you'll just stay in the green room, and then I'll wrap everything up, and I'll see you back there after the show.
Okay. And thanks to your audience for attending.
Yeah, thanks for the good questions, guys. So let's see. We need to know what to expect for next week. And I have to shout out to my wonderful subscribers at locals.com. So thank you to all of my paid members at locals.com. I really appreciate all of you. And if you're interested in checking out the Defenders Live community there, the Locals community is where I post exclusive Defenders Live content that you will not see anywhere else, including early access to featured Defenders Live episodes. And it's also where I host Defenders Uncensored. Defenders Uncensored is a series of roundtable discussions where we talk candidly about issues that some might consider controversial, but we don't think they should be. And they are on Locals for good reason, because we don't want to have to worry about getting kicked off of a particular platform. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can go to locals.com, go to the Discover tab, and search for Defenders Live, and we can see you over there. You can check that out. One more thing before I tell you what to expect for next week. We do have a new email address at Defenders Live. I don't know if I can find it. Man, I really miss Adam tonight. It really helps when he's around. New email, booking at defenders-live.com. If you have a topic or a person that you really would love to hear from, you can email me there and submit your ideas and or your people that you would like to see on the show. I'd love to hear from you. Or if you have any feedback about the show in general, you can email me there. And then as far as what to expect for next week, we have a roundtable discussion with let's see, 3 guests that I've had on Defenders Live before, but they all have something in common. I don't know if you remember, and if you don't, go back and watch the episode with Siobhan Thompson of Throttle and Thrive, Ryan Luco of Impact Montana, and Mike Davis of Made Man Coaching. All 3 of them and Adam and myself are all going to do a roundtable discussion next week on Wednesday. And really what we're talking about is what's going on in the veteran and first responder community, because all of those people are heavily invested in, not just through personal experience, but also through their organizations and their businesses, in helping veterans and first responders. Each of the people in that discussion are doing amazing work, and they all have different points of view, which is really helpful, and really trying to tap into what is really going on, especially with the mental health of veterans and first responders right now, and some real solutions to some of those issues. So that's what you can expect next week on Defenders Live. My lamp decides to go out from time to time. Sorry about that. But looking forward to having that discussion next week. And so you can tune in for that on YouTube, Facebook, or Rumbles, where you can find us 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Looking forward to seeing all of you guys again next week. Until then, take care.